All right, everybody. This is going to be episode number 2 of my 9/11 series, detailing in plain, simple terms how and why it happened. I'm currently driving home, and I felt like rambling on a little bit today. So I am going to talk about a couple of the hijackers and why 9/11 was not prevented. I'll figure out what to call it later. But there are two hijackers in question that I wanted to talk about because they're really like the central focus of why we could have prevented 9/11. And these two dudes are named Nawef al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Midar. These guys are Al-Qaeda operatives from the mid-90s onward. They went and originally fought in Chechnya against the Russians, which I believe was with the Bosnians. I'm not going to go and look it up right now, but it was during the Balkans. The powder keg that is the Balkans, they went over there to protect their Muslim brothers in Chechnya against the Russians. And so these guys are known Al-Qaeda operatives because they not only have gone to Chechnya and have fought with these rebels against the Russians, they have gone to the Afghan training camps of Al-Qaeda in the late 90s. These guys are experienced jihadists, all right? And so they end up, and these are for reasons that are not entirely clear, but they end up in Kuala Lumpur at a meeting with other Al-Qaeda operatives, including the known planners of and at least one person who executed the bombing of the USS Cole off the coast of Yemen. I believe that was in 1999. So, these guys are known Al-Qaeda operatives to the FBI. So, why were they allowed into the country? These guys are known Al-Qaeda operatives on the FBI's watch list because they met with Al-Qaeda operatives who did the USS Cole bombing, and they went to Afghan training camps, and they went to Chechnya. So here's the deal with the United States and the bureaucracy that our country dealt with prior to 9/11. Now, frankly, it may be worse at this point in time, but I digress. The FBI's Bin Laden unit, the anti-terrorism Bin Laden unit, was led by a fellow named John O'Neill. And John O'Neill was a career FBI agent, and he was kind of a powder keg also. He was like the human embodiment of the Balkans, if you will. He was a boisterous man, quite the character, but he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and it showed. He was ruthless about his work, and he got shit done, and he didn't care who he pissed off in the interim. So, because of this, he made a lot of enemies, including the ambassador to Yemen, Barbara Bodine. He actually was kicked out of the country investigating the USS Cole bombing because he had pissed her off so much. Anyway, he had this beef with Alex Station of the CIA. Alex Station was the Bin Laden anti-terrorism headquarters of the CIA, and it was headed at the time by a man named Michael Scheuer. And then after his departure, it was led by his now wife, Alfreda Francis Bukowski. Now, if you have seen the movie Zero Dark 30, the waterboarding lady, the redhead in that movie, is based on Alfreda Frances Bukowski, all right? And so when you hear what I'm about to say, you're going to understand why she was so miserable and why she just hated the world. So, Michael Scheuer was the original person that had a problem with John O'Neill. John O'Neill, again, was the leader of the FBI's Bin Laden unit. John O'Neill rubbed him the wrong way, and so he did not want to share any intelligence with John O'Neill because, John O'Neill is going to go out and arrest people, and he's going to blow the whole cover of any of their informants and whatever just to go arrest these low-level people. That was what he was afraid of. And John O'Neill didn't like that because John O'Neill is just trying to do his job. And his job in the FBI is to capture and prosecute criminals against the United States. The CIA gathers intelligence. You can see where they may have a conflict of interest because John O'Neill and his people want to capture and then prosecute these people, but the CIA wants to keep using these low-level people to keep climbing up the ladder. Anyway, Michael Scheuer ends up not the head of the Bin Laden unit of Alex Station anymore for the CIA. Alfreda Bukowski takes it over, and she was like his protege. Anyway, so she had the same resentment towards John O'Neill that Michael Scheuer, her now husband, had. So, the CIA was playing this fantasy game where they thought, they can just keep climbing the ladder and eventually they'll get to the top. Unfortunately, that's not how things work, and they failed miserably. They knew that Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar, after the Malaysia meeting, came to San Diego and were staying in the United States. These are known Al-Qaeda operatives. But see, the CIA doesn't know that. The CIA just knows that they went to this thing in Malaysia. They're suspicious, but they don't know anything about them. The FBI knows that they are known Al-Qaeda operatives, but they never shared that these guys were coming into the country, and so the FBI never had an opportunity to arrest them when they were in San Diego. When they were in San Diego, they took some flight lessons, and neither one of them were any good as pilots. So they were scratched from being in consideration for pilot positions on 9/11. And originally the 9/11 plot was really, really, really big. And so they were originally planning for 6, 8, 10 planes. Well, that didn't happen. They scaled it back. It was a little too ambitious at that point. So these guys ended up getting demoted to muscle hijackers, but they were still experienced and trusted jihadists. So they were kind of leaders in America, and they were two of the first people into the country. They were living in San Diego, and they were helped by their imam at the mosque in San Diego by the name of Anwar al-Awlaki. Now, that name may sound familiar to you, but if it doesn't, Anwar al-Awlaki was the very first U.S. citizen targeted and killed in an airstrike by the United States. His parents were originally from Yemen, but he grew up in Colorado. But he ended up in San Diego, and he was this radical imam with ties to Middle Eastern terrorism of various sorts. And so he helped these guys, and then afterwards, after 9/11, he went back to Yemen to be in his family's homeland. And like I said, inevitably, he became the first United States citizen to be targeted and killed by a United States airstrike. Anyway, These guys are helped in San Diego by Anwar al-Awlaki, and he was also their mentor as their imam. And they were allowed to be there because the FBI did not know they were in the country, because the CIA didn't want to share the intel, because Alfreda Bilkowski and Michael Scheuer had this pissing contest with John O'Neill of the FBI. And unfortunately, if they had just shared this information, these guys would have gotten arrested, and 9/11 probably would have been prevented. We were that close several times from stopping 9/11, but we didn't because of the bureaucracy and this pissing contest between these two government agencies. Now, the Department of Homeland Security oversees everything, and like I said, that may be even bigger bureaucracy, but that is for you to decide. As far as these guys, they were known Al-Qaeda operatives in the country, and they stayed in the country for a long time. Anyway, they helped people once they got to the United States. They were some of the first people there, and they helped kind of acclimate the terrorists to the United States. They also took surveillance flights to try to study what the patterns were on these planes so that they could share the information with the other hijackers, especially with Mohammed Atta, Ziad Jarrah, and Marwan al-Shehi of the Hamburg cell. They were three of the pilots on 9/11. The other one being Hani Hanjour. Hani Hanjour is a different story. He was not part of the Hamburg cell. But I'll get into the Hamburg cell at another time. But basically, these guys ended up being able to stay in the country because of this pissing contest. And they ended up being on American Airlines Flight 77 that was hijacked out of Washington's Dulles Airport and hit the Pentagon with Ziad, not Ziad Jarrah, Hani Hanjour at the controls. And we'll get into that flight when I talk about the individual flights. But Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi should have been arrested and weren't. And it's a very unfortunate circumstance. But those two guys being in the country really exposed just the incompetence of American law enforcement and American counterintelligence. And so, anyway, that is my spiel on the two hijackers who almost had 9/11 foiled through their own actions and just being in the country. But they weren't, because the CIA decided that they weren't going to share information with the FBI. And I guess I should go back now. So because of her failure and her personal vendetta against John O'Neill of the FBI, Alfreda Bilkowski of the CIA went on to become the Bin Laden hunter from the movie Zero Dark 30. Like I said, if you've seen that movie, you know the character I'm talking about, the torture lady. She hates the world so much and wants to get Bin Laden so badly because the blood of nearly 3,000 Americans were on her hands because she had this pissing contest with the FBI's John O'Neill. Now, if you've seen that movie, I think that makes a lot more sense to you, I'm sure. And a quick note on John O'Neill. He actually retired from the FBI after 20-odd years of hunting Osama bin Laden and hunting Al-Qaeda, trying to prevent the next attack. And in August of 2001, took a private sector job as the head of security at the World Trade Center and actually died in 9/11 in the cruelest twist of irony of all time. So, that is how 9/11 should have been and wasn't foiled because of a pissing contest between two government agencies.